Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody had a excellent New Year. I know mine was fun and full of debauchery, But anyhow, thank you for those who've been listening so far to the podcast. Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun to create and just sit down with friends and shoot the shit and learn a little bit about myself through these conversations, and I think that's extremely beneficial on my end, but also, you guys get more insight into who I am, and you get to kind of hear these different topics discussed, in these podcasts, and you can kind of make your own assumptions. So, all in all, it's been a pretty good experience so far, but the reason why we're here today, obviously, is episode 4 with my boy Troy, the man, Mr. Saeed, or Kyle, depending on what time period you know him from, Nobari. And Saeed is probably one of the best friends that I made at Florida State, in the advertising program together. We kind of came up together in that respect. And he's honestly great. And in terms of talking in length for a podcast, he was even better. And sorry, I'm getting a little sick here. You guys can probably hear my sniffles, but anyway, let's send it out to the podcast here where I have the one and only Mr. Saeed Nobari on. I didn't get the lines are so blurred.
On the come up.
I don't know what surviving is when you're 23. Is that like in relation to what you want to be doing or just paying the bills?
Honestly, it's a little bit of both.
A little bit of both.
Except now I'm 24, and it just hit me that this is like the last year I'm in that 18 to 24 like market research category. So, it's only downhill from there.
You were telling me about that, and I feel like I'm going through a quarter life crisis, and a product of that crisis is this podcast.
Dude, I was going through a quarter life crisis ever since I graduated high school.
So what's it? All right, so let's everybody that's listening, Saeed, thank you very much for coming on to episode 4.
Glad to be here.
Prism podcast. It's good to have you.
Before we jump in, this podcast is sponsored by Guinness Beers.
Are you drinking Guinness?
Life blood that runs through my veins.
Well,
shameless plug.
I wish you didn't say that because the only beer that I have in my house is Coors Light, and I'm not exactly sponsoring Coors Light here, but it is fermented liquid, and it is Sunday, and the playoffs are on, so
right.
I feel like it's only right to crack open a beer, even though it's a beer that we drank in college probably, and hop on this podcast.
Do you ever really graduate? I mean, it's probably.
I don't know. I feel like the lines have been so blurred since graduation. You know what I mean? I feel like I still have old habits that I've obtained at Florida State. So Saeed and I went to Florida State together, met through the advertising major, which we both got degrees in. But they don't say advertising. They say, what do they say?
Professional communications.
That's like saying that I can bullshit very, very well, and I have a degree that proves it.
Stress the BS.
That's why. Why would it say that on the degree when everything that we have done was under the advertising brand or name?
It's funny that you bring that up because I remember when it was posted in our respective, like everybody who was accepted in the majors group. Everybody was kind of like more or less aggressive. Actually, some were passive-aggressive about it. Some were more like verbal about how they hated that. But, the more I thought about it, it's actually kind of for the better that it says professional communications because I think, in not narrowing yourself down to that advertising label, it's a pretty broad degree for you to use towards like multiple avenues of your life.
Right. Like I'm not even doing advertising.
Right.
Now, right?
This is I guess professional communication.
I know this podcast is the epitome of professional communication here. I'm exercising the things that I've learned and putting them into action.
Exactly.
And by action, I mean drinking a beer on a Sunday, doing the things that we did 2 years ago.
And at the end of the day, a Florida State degree means something.
Oh, dude, Florida State. People talk shit about Florida State, how it's a public school and this and that, but it's not only on the come up, but the experience of going to a school like that pays dividends, not only in an academic perspective, but in a social perspective and experiential perspective, right? Because you have all these things that you can do, right? If you want to party your ass off, you can party your ass off. If you want to get involved in each clubs, you can get involved in each clubs. If you want to be a total fucking hermit and just stay at home, you can be a total fucking hermit.
You can do that.
So it's a good experience. I met Saeed through advertising, along with a bunch of other good friends of ours, and it's kind of funny. I feel like I've been, I guess, kind of not nostalgic and like thinking back to the times of Florida State, but missing the idea of being a college student.
Absolutely.
You don't have all these responsibilities. You don't have, especially at Florida State, where I honestly think, like, you know, it's not a false reality, but there's a lot of things that I don't attribute to the real world. So, like, living in a dope-ass house, right, with cheap rent like that, you know, kind of finessing and finagling your way through your classes and all that stuff, the parties, all that stuff. It's great. Not compared to the real world, though, when you have all this other shit.
I miss the days when my only responsibilities were deciding if I want to go to class on time, if not at all, and counting the hours until my next meal.
I know.
But, you know, it's one of those things, you know, I had, I guess, this epiphany early on, because me and my best friend, we had lived together in our dorms for the first 2 years, you know, and everybody was trying to, like, make the move off campus and stuff.
Right.
But, you know, I look back and I try to tell them, I'm like, you know, how often again in your life are you ever going to say, like, I lived in this, like, type environment, so, you know, you might as well just make the most out of it while you can. And, you know, through that, it like allowed you to be like spontaneous to things happening around you. And like those are experiences that, however much money and debt I am with tuition and stuff, like those are invaluable experiences.
Ditto, both on the tuition side and the experiential side.
Absolutely.
And it's, you know, going to Florida State, right? And like, so for me, I transferred in. So I went to TCC before I went to FIU freshman year, and I finally got to Florida State junior year, and I knew virtually nobody at Florida State other than like my family friends who you know, Saeed. And
but you're also a legacy too. So
I'm also a legacy, you know, but Florida State, like, hopefully the video will work, because if you see my room here, I have a Florida State mural on my wall, and I'll show you later, Saeed, but this is painted when I was 4.
Is that Peter Work?
It is Peter Work, and I don't know if you can see it. I'm not going to, like, fuck with it, but Chris Wanke's in the background, and they're playing the Jets. And it's 16-5 Florida State with 12:51 left to go in the fourth quarter, and it's 2nd and 1 on the 39. And the ball is actually, like, on the 39, which is crazy, or, like, it was. So anyway, I've deep lineage back to FSU, but I didn't really know that many people, and guys like Saeed and like Rodolfo, Mark Daniels, Sammy, all the advertising guys kind of created that community for me, which is what I needed.
Right. And honestly, that was something I'm glad that happened too, is because you know, people from different backgrounds come. I guess, you know, some from, you know, high school populations of like 2,000 plus kids. Mm-hmm. Some, you know, I meet. You know, they've been homeschooled or only had a graduating class of like a dozen kids, but more or less, you make that leap to the college landscape and very easily can become very overwhelming, especially if you don't have a clear sense of direction as far as what you want to do or what you want to get out of it. So, you know, more or less, you want to be that yes man and not be, you know, blind to experiences.
Right.
Like, for example, you know, Greek life at FSU is huge. I know it's not for everybody, and you know, this is a conversation for another time. But you know, with how the whole Greek life has been banned indefinitely because it hasn't been run to what it should be. I tell people, I'm like, you know, even if a fraternity, you know, sorority life isn't for you, you should at least go through the rushing experience just to, you know, get a taste of what that life is like, and you know, maybe you could meet some people out of it.
I think, and Florida State's a great place for this, is to get yourself out of your comfort zone.
For sure.
You know? And that's what college is kind of meant. It's not like learning things and being in the classroom is one thing, but you kind of go to college to learn how to be an adult. And with that, it's about taking risks, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, being spontaneous, not necessarily saying no ever, but being really inclined to say yes, right? And I feel like Florida State kind of offers that opportunity to you, but also you can get lost in the sauce real fast.
Because to piggyback off that, you think of where I guess your mindset is in high school, where you more or less have your own clique. You know which group you identify yourself with, and some people kind of have like this, like, oh, the world revolves around me outlook, and you realize quickly, like after that summer of like hanging out with your friends and like saying goodbyes, everybody goes their separate ways, that you more or less have to fend for yourself. And it's one of those things where those labels just get tossed out the window as soon as you get to college. And it's one of those things where like the whole like drama of who's the teen king, queen, like those things don't matter anymore.
No, I feel like in high school you kind of are figuring out who you are. In college, you kind of get to showcase who you are, and it's really predicated upon how involved you want to get with yourself. If you want to kind of turn off those like those cognitive things where you're about improving and putting yourself out of your comfort zone and party and all that shit, right? Instead of actually growing. And you can grow through partying. Like that's what Florida State's fucking built on is learning and having fun and doing these things.
Don't I know
it. And we've had our fair share of
don't I know it.
Of I think your couch is still there in Woodlands.
I used to feel like I should owe you guys a rent because I lived there on weekends.
No, if anything, we should have been paying you because it was so much fun. And Katie, my sister, works at Woodlands, and when she gets back, she's like a leasing agent, and she's really involved. And when she gets back, she's gonna see who lives at the old place, because I've left some messages scattered throughout, and I want to know if the legacy is being lived on, because it was a $700 a month apartment or townhouse. It had a pool next to it, tennis court, basketball court.
The pool wasn't even ready by the time you moved in.
Yeah, but they also gave us like a $500 stipend, and like they didn't charge us for rent.
That just fueled our binge drinking. That's all that was.
Oh God, I feel like we're due for a Tallahassee trip in the fall. I don't want to go back there right now unless there's like a good basketball game or there's like some football. So Taggart's going to be really exciting. I can't wait for Taggart.
We'll have to make a separate podcast about that.
I know. For those who don't know, Florida State hired a new head coach, Willie Taggart, and everyone's really excited about it.
The optimist in me will get on board, but I have my reservations as a guy that likes to see both sides. But
so let me ask you this: we're talking a lot about college, right? We're in that transitional phase still, where I graduated in August of 2016, like a year and 3 months ago, or whatever it is. You graduated last year in December, right? We're still kind of in this transition phase. I've had like 2 jobs already. Like it's kind of been a roller coaster. You could probably attest to that in some degree. What do you think what was the expectation versus the reality of like graduating, getting out into the real world?
I think more or less, and this isn't even like just with Florida State, I'd say just people in our age group in general, is that, I feel like people expect this natural succession of things where as soon as you're handed that diploma, you're entitled to, this dream job in a sense that it's relevant to whatever you got your degree in, and that, everything is going to be grand. And what I've come to find in the reality, though, is that, a lot of the times you won't get that job at the start. I have several friends who are still around like month 6 out of college, unemployed. Me personally, I had a different route, but, the job I'm in now, my boss was super transparent with me. He was like, this isn't the sexiest job, what you're doing. I'm in media buying, by the way. And he's like, it's not the sexiest job, but you'll learn a lot of experience, and my job is to transition you from a year's time to wherever you want to go. So, as long as you temper those kind of expectations and, allow yourself to walk through those doors of like wherever life takes you, the unwavering optimist in me, still feels like things can work out.
Oh yeah. I think so too.
I'd say for me now, it's one of those things where I don't have that aha moment that wakes me up in the morning and says, hey, like, I want to go make a difference in this, like as a passion. But it's one of those things where, kind of like having this podcast, you want to kind of pursue your sort of like ventures on the side for now until you say, hey, maybe I can make this something more out of it. So
For sure.
yeah, for me, I work to live, not live to work. So
Yeah,
I think
me too.
it's one of those things too where, in high school, maybe even some degree in college, they don't really prepare you for the real world in a sense of like what routine is like. I feel like right now I'm on this unending cycle starting out of paying bills the rest of my life. But
You remember when were you in my creative strategy class? I think, yeah, you're in my creative strategy class.
the Thompsons,
So
yeah.
like managing expectations, right? Like that was his.
Managing expectations.
I feel like I have done a not so good job at managing my expectations for graduation, because here's kind of like what has happened to me. So I've like been in love with like policy and politics for like since out forever, and advertising was kind of like the thing that I knew, right? That was like familiar, like with the internships and all that. It was a no-brainer. But like passion speaking, that's kind of where it's always been. So like my initial thought was, I traveled to Europe after graduation. I was like, all right, we're probably gonna get a job real quick, like 2 to 3 months. I didn't get a job until February of 2017. I was working at my dad's place until then. And then I got the internship in Washington, and then that ended, and I'm still looking for a job in politics. So the thing is, I feel like you have one expectation of what it's going to be like, almost, not a sense of entitlement, but almost predicting like a forecast, like this is what's probably going to end up happening given, X, Y, and Z. But that's never usually the case because life will throw curveballs at you that you don't foresee. And
Right. I believe there was a quote. It was like John Lennon said, life's what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Exactly.
So.
And I the goal is not change. It's like to get on a staff of some sort, right? But in the meantime, what can I do? What can I do just to push it out there, right? Because I feel like I could do that as well, but I feel like I didn't do an excellent job managing expectations. But it's more about keeping the main thing and not being sidetracked by what you thought was going to be.
Right. I think just a anecdote of what my experience is like leaving the realm of college. I remember it was the day after I got from the ceremony, and this is after a few of my close friends from outside of town had came in, had my little grad party and everything. And then I remember like immediately after that, the next morning, I had to like pack all my stuff and like put inside of a 26-foot U-Haul truck and drive it 5 hours up to Atlanta to like park it at my dad's place where I was staying temporarily.
Right.
It was one of those things where I guess a lot of people that will graduate in the summer or whatnot, they kind of have this goodbye tour where they'll see all their friends for the last time, kind of do like a victory lap around things that were nostalgic in college, but I didn't get that luxury. And so, the next day I moved to my dad's place, and my dad, being like the hard ass, like foreigner, like European that he is, he runs a kitchen that sells like Mediterranean cuisine in Atlanta. Great reviews, hole in the wall restaurant.
If you want to say the name of it and plug it even further, now's your opportunity with all 7 listeners.
If you're ever in the metro Atlanta area and you're having a hankering for Mediterranean delights, check out Baba's Gyro Kebab in Cumming, Georgia.
Oh,
fantastic eats.
Starving now, dude.
I will
Thanks.
say, but
hungry.
Him being the hard ass European guy that he was, like, had me go straight to work in his kitchen, and I went from waking up at 11, 12 noon,
Right.
to waking up at 8:30 and being in the kitchen 12 hours a day from 9 to 9. It was one of those things where, I found myself, I guess, where a lot of people are when they don't get a job right out of college, where they're just kind of like, you have all this time sitting on your hands, and you spend your whole life in an academic setting in which, you're around like-minded, similar-looking peers, and, you wake up for this reality now. It's like, wow, there's different kinds of people around me, different age groups, different orientations of life, and it doesn't stop for you. And so I'm in my dad's kitchen 12 hours a day, prepping vegetables and stuff. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, man, like doubt creeps in when you're like looking at social media. You're kind of comparing yourself to other people with what they're doing in their lives. And it's one of those things where you feel like both inadequate and at times complacent. And I'm just like, man, like I got my degree and like here I am in the back of a fucking kitchen.
That's my fear. That's my fear a lot of the time is that,
but
go ahead.
It's one of those things where I kind of preach this. It's like my mental mantra is minor setback, major comeback. So, before I graduated, I had applied for the MAPE internship, multicultural advertising internship program. And, I don't know, I did it on a hunch after having avoided it so long. So I kind of just shot my shot. And here I am working in my dad's kitchen. I get a email in February saying, hey, you've been recruited to work at an agency in Dearborn, Michigan. And I was like, wow, at the time I had clicked off everything as far as where I'd want to go in case I got this internship, if it would increase my chances. And I was like, Dearborn, Michigan, I know nothing about this place, but it was one of those things where like, it was binding should you accept it or not.
Right.
And, I told myself, I'm a young single guy for the most part. Like I'm gonna just be open.
For the most part, wait, hold on, don't just go over that. What does that mean for the most part? All right, you're probably you're a young dude in Detroit. You're probably getting after it.
I digress.
All
but,
right, fair enough.
It's one of those things. I kind of just took that leap of faith, knowing this is where the door opened for me. Like don't be ignorant to the experience. You never know what can come out of this.
Right.
And I think looking back for me, it was one of those things where it was a move that had to happen because I think what happens is when people – it's the same way as when you graduate high school coming into college that, your first couple weeks in college, you kind of gravitate towards, people you went to high school with.
Yeah.
And then you notice as the years go on throughout college, like people kind of just, divide from each other, go on, do their own things. And more or less it's the same way with college. Granted, I made some of my best lifelong friends in college, but I knew that like had I stayed in Tally any longer after I graduated, I would just fall in this like never-ending circle of like just frivolous spending and like drinking. And at some point, you got to face the music. And I thought to myself, me going to Detroit would be the opportunity for me to dial back and like get to hone in on like what I need to do for myself in order to propel my future going forward.
Yeah, you can't be a college student forever. As much as much as I would love to live in 2015, 2016 for the rest of my life.
Yeah. 2013.
Yeah, true.
Great.
2013 was a great fucking year. 2014 was every year in college was fantastic. Let's be honest. But I feel like you mentioned that you took that leap of faith, right? And you went to Detroit, and it's worked out for you, right? Like you have the job, which is good. It might,
right.
Pulling all the extracurricular stuff about satisfaction, passion, all that stuff. Like you have the job, which is good. You're on that path. When I was working at Esquire, full discretion, it wasn't what I wanted to do, right? It was advertising sales, which, nothing against it, obviously. But, I feel like I'm made to do other things, right? And my good friend who works in Washington for this congressman was like, I'll get you an internship with a New York congresswoman. I'm like, fuck yeah, like this is my out. Like this is where I can actually go ahead and pursue, what I want to do, getting on a staff, right? Doing, legislative stuff or policy stuff. But the thing that happened was it was a 6-week internship, right? The second half of the summer. You don't get paid as a congressional intern.
Right.
And I had a finite amount of funds to get me through that summer, right? To pay the rent on the sublet, food, X, Y, and Z. And my hope was within those 6 weeks I'd be able to get a job on the Hill, right? And
yeah, it's usually a goal.
Yeah, and I, countless meet and greets, right? Networking. I have like 30 business cards from people I met. And it didn't work out. Like I ran out of time, right? So I couldn't, get that job then and there. And, it's discouraging because, but when I graduated, I went to work for my dad, right, at the TV show, which you know about. Then Esquire, and then Washington. Right now I'm back at the TV show. So I feel like I don't want to say what you were saying earlier about being complacent, like sitting there and being like, oh fuck, like what went wrong? It's not that anything went wrong. It's just that your process is still continuing. And I try to tell myself that I don't want to get discouraged because I'm still applying for stuff. Like I've picked it up, like people are, it's all good on that front. But I really, and for others as well, if you're in that like discouraging point where something didn't necessarily go right, that doesn't mean it's over, right? It's just a lesson.
Right.
And I feel like
Exactly.
It's important for people to understand that, especially, when we're millennials, right? It's 2017. We all want to do the things that we want to do. We're passionate about, right? And eventually we could and we will. But it's really about accepting failure at times and kind of learning, from things that have happened to you and move forward in that respect.
Exactly.
So we'll see how, dude, I might be, my goal, my dream, this is my actual dream, is to like move to Bali or like the Virgin Islands or something like that and just like sell coconuts. That's it. That's it. Just cut them down myself and sell them. And then I'll have like a bacon, egg, and cheese shop on the side. Like that's my goal. But until
at the bodega.
I want to have a bodega. I want to have the first
Your
coconut.
favorite word.
I have a lot of favorite words, but bodega is definitely one of them for sure. And bacon, egg, and cheese.
It's one of those things. I remember if we're going back to creative strategy class. You mentioned managing expectations, but I think another takeaway that I had was Matt Thompson had told us success is when you could rule your own calendar.
That's what I want. That's exactly what I need.
No, that's what we want. Yeah. It's not always realistic, especially you're older and you have kids and they have their own demands set with that and everything. But I kind of just going to take a step back and I think as millennials, it's one of those things where we consume content and just everything, at a very quick rate. We want things instant gratification.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Whether that's, things like media to, our food taking less than 10 minutes from the time we order at a restaurant. And I think it's important to realize that, while some of us are innately talented, you have to realize that you have to kind of put in the work and build that level of, I guess, like a reputation in order to take that next step, with people that are, I'd say, above you in terms of where your career is. So that way they can build you into that, professional that you think you can become.
Yeah, you gotta meet the right people. You gotta be in the right circles, and
right.
Patience almost isn't a virtue nowadays. I know with me, I need to work on being more patient, but I also need to work on putting myself out there more, for sure, especially if I want to get involved in politics where it's all face, right? You kind of got to
shoot your shot. Shoot your shot 2018.
Got to shoot the shot 2018. I don't have any New Year's resolutions, but that definitely is my acting one now, for sure.
I hope it's not New Year's regression for me.
I hope not, too. 2017 was an interesting year, for sure. Hopefully 2018 has, some good things ahead of it, because if not, we're going to have to reevaluate things.
I know. Before it's things like getting into toxic relationships, getting fatter, alcoholism, all that.
I'll take the toxic relationship for sure at this point. I need some spice on that side of things for sure. Not a lot to do when you're and I thought at this point that I'd have my own apartment in New York or something.
Yeah.
I'm still commuting, which isn't bad. I'm saving money and all that, but you kind of have this idea of what you're going to be out of college, right? So I thought it was going to be an advertising gig and then move on to politics, but it's kind of jumped around a little bit. But I think 2018 will be a good year for the both of us. It better be. If it's not,
every new year there's always that renewed optimism to where you can kind of change things around that weren't working from the year previous in order to make it better for yourself. But
do you believe in New Year's resolutions?
You see, I think resolutions has a bad connotation to where it's kind of for example, it's usually some sort of thing to where you're setting yourself up to fail in the short term. So, your average cliche is I'm going to eat healthier or I'm going to go to the gym more. That's like me going to my dentist and he tells me, hey, you should really floss. And I say, sure, doc, I'll do it. And, I falter 2-3 weeks later. I think it's one of those things where you should definitely have 2018 goals, something that you can work towards. Because me telling myself I'm not gonna drink Coca-Cola outright for the whole year, it's not realistic.
Definitely not for you.
you know, I'm better about it now. I've actually started drinking water around the office every day.
Oh, you're
But
evolving.
evolving. But it's one of those things where I know it's not going to be completely out of my life. I'll limit it to like social occasions, like those kind of things. But I think 20, like instead of resolutions, it should be like you should set yourself a benchmark for you to reach by the end of that year. So it's like me saying, hey, I want to go to 3 cities I've never been to. It doesn't even matter how seemingly mundane. It could be freaking like Butte, Montana. I don't even care. Just something that you have not seen, up to that point.
So
things like that.
So you mentioned cities, right? Things to visit, and
Right.
you've lived. Let me see if I got this down. You ready?
You could try.
Tampa.
$1 million question.
Tampa,
yes.
Atlanta.
Yes.
Jacksonville.
No.
No, what?
Never Jacksonville.
Somewhere else in Florida besides Tampa?
I lived in Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale. Okay, not
for a year.
Not that close, but that's okay. On the intercoastal.
Yeah.
On.
Not my favorite place. Sorry if I offended any Fort Lauderdale viewers.
That's like 85% of my listenership, dude. No, I'm just kidding. I have no fucking idea. I have no idea. I like South Florida, but how do you like Detroit? Because you're well traveled in that respect. How do you like Detroit?
It's funny that you mentioned well traveled. I actually never considered myself that until you said it.
I would say,
but,
let me backtrack. You've moved around a lot.
Yeah, you know what? You would think I was like a military brat or something, but it was actually my dad. A lot of people might not know this, but the restaurant industry is a very volatile environment.
Oh no! What? Really?
Oh yeah. And so I just kind of moved around the Tampa area. Like every time my dad got taken advantage of or got laid off from his job because management stuff.
Right.
And I remember I swear this is probably people will say college and stuff is a time for you to find yourself, but there is not a more pivotal time in your life than middle school. And I changed middle schools every semester, which is tough. And I think that kind of bodes well into how I'm able to, I guess, adapt to the different kinds of environments. So I like to tell people, because I was born in Atlanta, lived in Tampa half my life, and then did the second half of my life growing up in Atlanta. So if they ask me where my hometown is, I'll say Atlanta, Florida. Yeah, wholeheartedly.
Didn't you make a graphic with that too?
I did.
I know.
I did.
God, dude, I'm running down memory lane right now. Seriously.
You got your Florida map right here, and then your Georgia map, and you flip it over. But it's one of those things where I kind of appreciate both for what they offered my personality. I'll say I got my energy in Florida, but my manners in the good old South of Georgia. So.
Well, I'll tell you what. The volume of experiences definitely have benefits, right? Because you've seen so much, and you can almost say that you've had to grow up faster. Would you say that?
Yeah, definitely. Especially, this is another sidetrack. My mom has been through 2 divorces already, so it's one of those things where, I'm the oldest of my siblings, and I had to be that for everybody. So
you gotta be, you had to. There's been times where you had to be the man. You've had to do certain things to help the family.
First in my family to graduate college, and now, it seems like I'm the one to move the furthest away. And it's one of those things with Detroit. The only ever prior exposure I've had was my best friend I've grown up with since the 3rd grade. His family, they're all from there, and I've kind of had a little crash course on knowing what some of the cultural things are over there in terms of dining and the misery of being a Lions fan, those kind of things. But
oh my God, I can't even imagine.
Now that you ask, what's my experience in Detroit been like? I will say this: when I got that offer letter saying I was going to Dearborn, right off the bat, I knew nothing about Dearborn, and admittedly, I was pretty disappointed when I saw that all my friends were going to, New York and LA for their internships and they got recruited to. And I told myself, I kind of firmly believe that everything happens for a reason, and you're where you need to be at any certain point in life. And it's one of those things where my prior mindset was, man, Detroit, you think about the housing recession bubble and stuff in 2008.
Right.
I was like, man, there's gonna be riots every day, and 8 Mile, like Eminem, like just people get shot for no reason. It's really stupid now that I think about it. But I remember it got to a point where I had this mindset where, everybody's going to New York and whatnot, and, they would tell me how their living situation was crap, how like they were living in like these NYU dorms. And me personally, like I was like in like this studio apartment to myself, like downtown Detroit, which was like way beyond my expectations. It was pretty fantastic. But I remember when I first got there, Detroit is like such a, well, people don't realize it's such a historically like rich like hub of what used to be like life. Like it was the trending city at one point, and I think
it was the Rome of the United States. It was going to be the Rome of the United States. That's what a lot of people were saying.
The way Atlanta is now, kind of like the new Hollywood, like Detroit was that for the music scene. Town. Like everybody wanted to move out over there, and they're still known as the Motor City, kind of the hub of all things automotive. And you could tell they want to get back to that sort of prominence to where they enjoyed the title of being a prominent big city. But when I first got there, I noticed that things were gentrified, and I know like gentrification is one of those things. It's a kind of divisive subject. I get both sides of the argument, but in some ways Detroit kind of needed it, especially if it wanted to.
Absolutely.
I think their approach is they want to attract more young millennials like us to, I guess, bolster their workforce and like reputation of the city. Because when I got there, they told me like, wow, you got here at a good time, because it wasn't until like a couple of years ago everybody was moving out of this town, and I got to walk around and kind of like I've been here since June, so maybe about what? How long is that? At least about.
I don't know. I can't count. I'm an ad major.
Yeah, I'll say like 6 to 8 months now.
Okay.
And just I guess my perception of Michiganders in general, very hardworking, humble. Honestly, the nicest people I've met in my entire life.
I'm sure you won't hear anything bad out of them.
Total Midwestern hospitality and like charm and everything. And I kind of joke. I'd say part of it has to do with them living so close to Canada.
Oh, they're right there. I keep forgetting that, like on that strait, the Straits of Detroit.
It's funny because I was thinking about the song "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey, and you say they're like just a city boy born and raised in South Detroit. I'm just like, that's Canada for sure.
Born and raised in Canada.
It just occurred to me, and so it's everybody's so friendly and like welcoming, and like you can honestly like just start a conversation with strangers on the street. Like even the homeless people, like they dress moderately like well, kind of tacky like old school like 70s pimp sometimes, but like they're more or less like sane. Like you have good conversation with them, and I guess the only thing though is that like they can be pretty boring, sometimes like predictable in their routines, like. I know a lot of the people I know are kind of like married, dating, or engaged to like their high school, college sweethearts, and like more or less, it seems like its own kind of bubble. Like everybody like knows like their friends from elementary school and stuff. Well, which is nice. It's just not the environment I'm used to.
Right. Yeah. It's a square jawed, put a Bible between their arm kind of place. Would you say?
I'd say it's definitely white collar and blue collar. It's like blue collar and a white collar space.
It's a beige collar.
Beige collar.
Whatever the mixture of blue and white is, I guess light blue.
I will say this: it is a place where you can have the room to start your foundations and find yourself as an independent person in this world.
So would you say that it's beneficial that you're out in Detroit right now and not in New York or Miami or in Atlanta or Chicago?
I would say so, personally, because I know that I can get sidetracked, when I have things like my friends and like, nightlife and all that stuff around me. That's not to say that like, Detroit doesn't have those things, but I just know that, me being out here gives me the room to be disciplined, to know that like, right out of college, I want to start being more financially responsible and like, take my career seriously and everything. And
you didn't know anybody when you moved out there initially, right? So you kind of had to almost
Yeah.
like not create yourself, but essentially start anew.
Yeah, to kind of redefine who I am, like, after college ended. And it was one of those things where I always had, like, my best friend I mentioned growing up. He would give me, like, the rundown on a bunch of things. But when I got there, I remember, like, my first day, I got to the office and there was like 20 other interns, and all these guys were, like, from Michigan State, University of Michigan, Central Michigan, those things. And right off the bat, like, everybody was just so, like, nice and welcoming, and like we all clicked. And it was nice to know that, like, the agency that I'm at, people don't want to see people fail.
That's always good.
It's always good. And honestly, like, it's kind of cliche. You go to, like, an interview and people will tell you, like, oh, what's your company culture like? And those things are important.
They are.
Because you figure you're spending 40 plus hours of your work week, 60, if you're entry level advertising, let's be honest, in that environment. So you want to know that, you have a nice core of people to work around. And I think that kind of, like, planted my foundation there and allowed me to have them be my rock for the most part. Fortunately for me, I made friends outside of the office. So like, I'm a big Spurs.
I'm sure you could do that pretty fast. And yeah, you probably joined up with a Spurs group. You fuck.
Yeah, I found a supporters group, on Facebook, and it's cool because when we meet up once a week on the weekends at this bar in Corktown, which is like the Irish district of Detroit.
Okay.
And you got, like, just different kinds of people. Like, we have, like, a 17-year-old kid who can't even, like, drink alcohol. This kid gets, like, a milkshake every and, like, he's going to prom soon. So, like, we, like, gave him the guy talk. And
oh my god, that's awesome though.
It's all so you got guys like him. You got, like, a nurse that works overtime. You got, like, a dad. Guys skipping work to come and stuff. So it's just, like, this eclectic bunch of individuals. But, like, that's just kind of how life is, though. You get out into, like, the real world, working world, and everybody, you have to realize, like, isn't on the same playing field as you. There's always people, like, doing better, people doing worse. And, just things like that. And, like, you kind of just branch out from there. So
I feel like community is important, too. So
definitely.
It doesn't matter if you move to a new city or you've, like me, you've moved back home, right? It's if those things kind of keep you balanced, keep you in check, right? So, you're not like, so for me, I feel like I worry a lot about future stuff. Like, am I going to have that gig that I want? Am I going to have my own place? Am I going to, potentially go to law school? Like, all this other shit. And there's things that, you do in life to give you community, to make you feel like you're a part of something, and also keep you grounded, right? Because if you're, like, busting your ass all day, so like you said, you might work 60 hours a week, right? You go fucking crazy because it's a desk job, dude. Like, desk jobs, I'm not, like, the biggest fan of. I know, like, you gotta do it.
Right.
There's just something to me, like, horrifying about sitting at a desk from 9 to 5 until you're 65. You know what I mean?
It's funny you mentioned that. I thought about that, and for the most part, I'm a pretty optimistic guy. People think I'm crazy because, on record, I've never had an entire cup of coffee in my entire life.
What?
And yeah,
I've had 2 already today.
And you know me, like, senior year of college, I worked, like, the midnight shift at Chick-fil-A from, like, 10 p.m. till, like, 7 in the morning, having class 10 a.m. 3 hours later. I don't know. I guess I was just blessed with an iron willpower. But, I know, like, we live in a world today where, people get depressed and discouraged easily, when they find things aren't going right in their lives. And, it's easy to do. Like, I'm, like, pretty fucking miserable sometimes, like, with all this seasonal depression. Like, it's a real phenomenon,
Oh, yeah.
I've never experienced negative 2-degree weather until now.
Well, welcome to my life.
The North.
Welcome to the North, baby.
I'll never be that guy that goes back home down south again and, like, complains that 55 is cold ever again.
Oh, my God, I'd be walking out in shorts and a tank top.
Oh, my God.
And,
you
like,
have no idea.
put a beach towel out and be like, y'all fucks.
Exactly. I'll do that when it's 40 degrees out now.
That's partially why I miss the South, is because it's just like, well, first of all, it's slower pace than New York. Here in New York, it's always crazy, but also the weather is just so fucking nice. And Florida State was vacation land. Like, seriously.
It was.
Straight up vacation land with beautiful women, sunny and 78, like, during the winter, and then you get to go to your favorite bars and go to football games and, beat fuckers in FIFA religiously.
I know who you're referring to, but
I beat Thames came and visited me in December, and I whooped his ass like 3 games in a row. Well, he
Oh
beat
my
me the
gosh.
first game, and then I had to pour it on him really
He's
quick.
probably like this controller wasn't working.
Nah, there's
properly.
no excuses. No, imagine if he fucking did that. It's funny to reflect on like the friends that you made in college and kind of because you and I we've spoken sparingly or sparsely throughout graduation. We've stayed in touch, obviously, right? But it's another thing like getting to see these old friends and like shooting the shit and you gotta come visit New York or I gotta come out to Detroit,
Dude.
one or the other.
The funny thing is, I was in New York. I'd say beginning of August last year, because we had like a week-long conference where we had to.
You talking about 2017 or 2016?
Yeah, 2017.
Oh, okay.
And I think when I contacted you, you were still in DC at the time for something.
Yeah, I got back from Washington the 15th, and a lot of people ask me, and I'm like a spoiled New Yorker, so like New York is my benchmark for what a city should be. And Washington's fantastic. Like it's a lot of it's really clean. The metro's fantastic. Like I don't mind people that much. Some of them are assholes, like they're Washingtonians.
That's everywhere.
But it's not New York. Like none of the buildings in Washington can be taller than the Capitol.
Right.
So it's almost like a small town feel, but it's a big city. And it's not the same as New York.
I feel like me and you have different views of New York though, just because naturally you're born and raised there. You have a different worldview than I do. But
so what's your view of New York?
So last time I was there in August was my 4th time, which is crazy because like
Ad Club.
I had shout out Ad Club.
Shout
the
out.
thing was like my whole life I always wanted to like check out New York. You see how it is like portrayed in like movies, like comic books and stuff.
Yeah.
It truly is like objectively speaking like the hub of all things going on the planet. And it's crazy to think that like last time I was there was my 4th time. I've been like 4 times in a 2-year span for like a week at a time each time, and I was just like, it's crazy like how fast your life picks up when like you don't expect it. And for me personally, I always thought it was like a place I wanted to end up, and I haven't honestly ruled out the possibility yet. But I don't know, like for me right now, I think okay when I first got to New York, my very first time, you come out the subways, from the E train at the airport. Down to Manhattan.
The A train.
Dude, I swear, there's no words to describe what it's like when you see like that cityscape around you for the first time.
Yeah, I can't. It's been like a part of me, but I can only imagine like getting there and not only hearing all things about it, but having aspirations to one day go there.
Right, and I see the allure of it. It's a very fast-paced city.
Sort of dreams
for me,
freedom, man.
Right, but at the same time, I feel like. It's a great litmus test of a city to know, like, if you've got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. And I think, there's moments where, like, I'm gung-ho about, like, living there. But other times I'm like, I don't know if this is for me. And, like, that's honest because people always tell me that when it comes to New York, you either move there, like, soon right out of the gate or it just never happens at all. And, like, you're either there for, like, a year or two or, like, you're a lifer.
Yeah, so, I don't know, man. New York isn't going anywhere.
It's not.
Unless, climate change and that shit gets wiped out. Then you can kiss my ass goodbye. I'm going down with the ship.
Right. And honestly, there's so many opportunities in New York that, like, I honestly feel like it's not easy. It's not hard to find a job there, but it's just like whether you have.
It's competitive as fuck, dude. It's like a full-time job finding a job there. I'm still hunting for a job here.
Well, even that, it's like, I guess, like. Let's say you lower your standards just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You get a job, and like, it's not this agency you want to work at, et cetera, but it's one of those things where, the burnout is so real, it kind of discourages people from
100%.
Finding that next venture in New York from the one they were just in. So
a lot of people from our generation are kind of, and not me, I'm like telling you, like, this is who I am. Right. This guy, did you see the Kyrie Irving article with, like, him, like, actually the Cavs wanted to trade him, not him.
Yeah.
So Kyrie was saying, or this guy was saying, Kyrie's like wired differently. He needs like a new adventure like every 2 years. Right?
Yeah, he felt like the fans were forgetting about him, if I remember correctly.
And I'm kind of the same way. I'm not telling you I'm like fucking Kyrie Irving, even though I wish I was. I kind of have the same handles as him, but
I don't have the disposable income he does to do that. So
I definitely I'm definitely adventurous. I kind of get bored fast. So like in
Right.
Esquire, I got bored, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. So the boredom kind of kicked in, pretty hard. But especially with New York, the opportunities are there. It's just like a fucking bitch to get here. You
Right.
know what I mean? Because you got to compete with like 100 other people who want the same job. Like, I literally just applied for a job in Long Island, like a political job, and
Right.
I didn't get it because 60 other people applied, and most of them were actually from. It was like a Long Island political job. Kind of had to be from there. So they
Right.
told me like I was qualified, and like they loved me, but they really want someone from Long Island, and it's competitive as fuck because like a little thing like that could either get you the job or keep you on the search.
Right. And unfortunately, it is in some context like about who you know rather than what you know.
Oh no, that's totally the game. And
Which,
unfortunately, politics, I don't know that many. I know people, but not enough to like get me a job tomorrow.
yeah, and unfortunately, it's not a realm I could really offer that much insight into since politics aren't really my thing. But
It's
I,
not.
I,
That's nobody's thing. It's like
I, I will say this though, that an underrated quality underrated or overlooked quality that people don't realize is like, all right, especially if we're talking advertising here, it's very much a service driven industry.
hmm
And we both, as majors in the ad program at FSU, we realized that, you look back in hindsight and like our program was rooted on account services.
Oh yeah, totally, for sure.
And so,
I don't even know if it was rooted on anything. But continue.
no, it was totally accounts based. And like, it's one of those things where you realize it's a relationship driven industry between, agency and client. And, to that extent, like down to consumers. And people overlook just being good to people. Like, I get it. It's
golden rule, man.
It's a competitive industry, but at the same time, like the impression that you leaves like, a footprint on someone's mind in terms of like, having that recall to say, hey, this person like, came to work on time, did what was asked of them and then more, treated people with respect around here. And I don't think people realize, how much that like matters in terms of like getting that next job or like your foot in the door.
Oh yeah, we're all human, dude. And despite all the facades that people put up, like, oh, we have bottom lines, right? We need our employees to do X, Y, and Z. Like at the end of the day, human beings need, positive reinforcement. They want connections and relationships with others. And these simple things, if you apply to practice, right, and especially in a work environment, you can see incredible dividends from it.
And the thing is, you touching on how you mentioned community. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
That's what I say, yeah.
I feel like the basic building block is like, people want a sense of belonging.
That's all they want, man.
From there, you build up self-actualization, and especially, those are things you want, especially if you're a young individual out of college making that leap to a new city. Like those are things that you want, and I think so. Like I think advertising to the casual observer who doesn't really know much about what it is will think like in terms like Mad Men, where it's a super cutthroat industry, dishonest. But I think nowadays, especially that there's so many different like platforms of media to consume, that brands are going out their way to be more transparent with who their consumers are. You want to build that sort of trust. And I think that relationship exists between employer and employee. You want those kind of things. I remember when we got into the major, that one of our professors, I don't know, it might have been Solomon, I'm not sure, but they told me if a job was based on merit, what's the point of the interview? And it's one of those things where like, sure, you have to have tough skin living in New York City. And it's one of those things where, it's a cutthroat industry. You're probably going to get turned down a lot, but you just got to take it on the chin that like that interview experience itself is valuable for how you can mentally prepare for the next one.
Oh, dude, I think like when I got back from Washington, I had an interview, and I totally fuck the interview. That's my strongest.
Yeah.
I'm really good at interviewing, but I fucking shit the bed with this interview. And, you have to like go back and reevaluate, right? How do you go about all these things? And when I had the interview for that Long Island job, I thought it was one of my best interviews. You know what I mean? It's about rebounding and all that shit. But you mentioned my concern with advertising is that it's always going to be advertising. So
Right.
what I mean by that is, and I come from a brand entertainment background, so I know the power of storytelling and how it relates to brands and what that impact can be on the consumer. But at the end of the day, I feel like advertising is always going to be advertising, and the consumer is going to be able to identify that it's an ad that they're watching, or because it's like, and I'm not like shitting on advertising. I just think that it's always going to be, it's not going to be more than what it is. It's always going to be about advertising, right?
I'll tell you this.
But I come from a brand entertainment background, so I understand
Right.
like the power of storytelling. But at the end of the day, whether you're doing a 30-second spot or doing a documentary, on a product, right, or whatever, it's still only going to resonate with 2 to 3% of the people that consume it.
Right. And, I think as an advertiser, once you realize that, your content is going to fall through like the noise in that space, it's one of those things back then, it was like traditional media, TV, print, out of home. More or less, that was a time when consumers needed brands.
Yeah.
But now that, you look at people our generation, we have more compartmentalized and complex tastes for so many different things that the brands more or less need, the consumer. And so, a lot of the power shifts over to them.
100%.
And I think as a person working in this industry, you have to put yourself into that lens, like consumer first, before really like thoughtfully like putting out things that are going to be like remarkable and like resonate within somebody's mind, because our attention spans are very short. I don't know how I was watching something the other day, and they were mentioning how like back in the day, like in like old black and white movies and stuff, that when they were shot, like cinematography used, they used minimal cuts. So that way it was just kind of like a person enters the room and it kind of just like pans out and like you see all the subjects on that frame and like they're kind of interacting with each other.
Right.
But nowadays, our attention spans are honestly shorter than the amount of time it takes for a quarterback to like snap a ball and get it thrown. Like,
oh yeah,
three
step or 5-step drop back.
We're talking about slant route, 3-step drop.
Dude, not even just a 1-step then throw.
Yo, matter of fact, 3 seconds is a luxury nowadays.
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, like you look at TV now, and there's so many different cuts to like transitions and all these things, like over the shoulders and whatnot. Like everybody wants different perspectives.
Yeah, you have to keep the attention of the consumer, but also catering. And you hit the nail on the head, right? Where back in the day, in the golden age of advertising, I guess we can say, the consumer needed the brand, right? Now the brand needs the consumer, and that's why things like branded content and like branded entertainment
Right.
and all these different digital advertising have come about, because now the power is in the hands of the consumer, right? Which honestly is fantastic, right? If it was the other way around, it would kind of be fucked. But for the most part, especially when it comes to, whether it's consumer products or, specialty items, it's really about creating genuine content, right? That tells a story. And I'm like huge on telling stories. So especially in
Right.
politics, right? If you can tell your story, if you're on a campaign or like you have an agenda, if you can tell that story effectively,
Right.
then that's how you go about success. But with advertising as well, it's all about the story. And there's a good
Right.
book that I'll recommend to you and also the viewers listening, because we haven't forgotten about you.
That's right. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. You guys, not me, not Saeed, but you guys. And it was written by this is when I was at Ogilvy interning. It was written by the creative director, and it was like the power of storytelling, right? And what storytelling has meant to humans since the dawn of human beings, right? So whether that's drawing shit on caves, right, or creating, a branded content documentary on toothpaste, right? If
Right.
you're telling a compelling story, right, that's going to attract more people than not.
Right. And to piggyback off of that, with brand and content, as far as it's concerned, what's great about it is, it's kind of deviating from the original platform to where
Yeah.
instead of talking about like, all right, we're promoting like this product or like, this sort of like, I guess like market share category, branded content, like what's great about it is like it's like emphasized more on like promoting like that brand's personality and like how it aligns with yours.
Hell yeah.
You know?
Hell yeah. And I have a good example. So one of my accounts at Ogilvy was DuPont. I had DuPont and Phillips. And those two brands, are not, they are, Phillips can be B2C, right? But they're primarily B2B, which is business to business. B2C is business to consumer. So the whole idea with DuPont especially is how can we create a story, right, that's gonna have a positive effect on businesses. So one thing that we did, and this is like the most fascinating, this is the best internship I've had, like by far, besides the Capitol Hill one. But what we did was DuPont, which they're like kind of evil, let's be honest, with chemicals and all this crazy shit.
Right.
But they're trying to change that perspective, right? And that's where brand entertainment comes in. So what we did was they have this product, I forgot what it was called, but they used that product to pave the road from Pretoria, South Africa to Maputo, Mozambique. And the thing with that road especially is that it's a major road that goes from the port of Maputo to Pretoria. It's one of the main lifelines of Pretoria is that port, right? So they were telling stories on the drivers, right, that go to and from the port and back and forth, all that shit, on the positive effects of the DuPont product, right? So the wear and tear on the cars, traffic, X, Y, and Z. So South Africa moves faster a little bit because of a DuPont product. So they're taking something that's, they have such a negative perception, like between the DuPont family and the chemicals and like in that entire industry, like the Koch brothers and all that shit. Mm-hmm. They've taken, a brand image that's negative and shown how it's positive. So that's what I like about advertising nowadays.
Yeah.
I think that's really positive. I just don't like how it's almost like a buzzword contest where it's like all these brands, you go on Adweek and you see these people talking, it's all like linkativity, like all this crazy buzzword shit. Well, I don't get caught up in that, but if you create like meaningful content that tells a story and tells people what the brand is, then I'm all for it,
Right. Yeah. Instead of like this real-time sensationalism stuff that honestly just it's popular for like a second and then you forget about the next day.
I know. That's something I like to see that resonates.
So where I work, Ford is like our main client. They've been for about 60 years now. And
660, you said?
Yes, 60 years.
God damn.
Probably like one of the longest lasting agency client relationships existing right now. And to be honest, I'm not one to know like things about car parts, seeing as how I'm not a vehicle owner right now. I used to like commute everywhere. But
you don't have the moped.
Dude, moped died on me.
What's her name? I forgot her name.
Good old Margot.
Margot! Damn, I remember you and I have videos of us riding on it. Fuck.
Lady of my life, man.
Damn, me too.
Nothing but good memories.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, kind of like going off your story, like, so, with Ford, it's always been one of like the prominent brands of the automotive industry. Yeah. But I think they now have a very specific demographic in terms of like who they appeal to. It's older, baby boomers type. Granted, they're trying to like, position themselves to like, appeal to younger consumers with like ride sharing initiatives and, autonomous vehicles in the future. So, they're very much working on being innovative still. But I remember we had a, and this is probably how it is with like a lot of car companies is that, they kind of cater to the demographic of like, like for example, like a fast car or like a big pickup truck with a heavy like towing capabilities. Mm-hmm. They're gonna like implicitly like target those towards like a male audience, and they'll say like, all right, this like van or SUV is like for moms, and so I think women are like a minority demographic in that sense. But I think what was cool, like Ford tried to do in terms of brand and content was they had this series where, they had this crew go around to different chapters of like a Girl Scout club.
Right.
And, you think of Girl Scouts like selling brownies and cookies and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, the boys would do things like swimming lessons and like overnight camping and like particularly those like wooden like derby cars that they make.
Right.
And so, they had like a little workshop that they had like a video of teaching girls how to like, learn about different like aspects of car, like torque and RPM and all that stuff. So that way they had them at the end of it make their own wooden cars and like test them out in this competition. So it's all about, just bringing up that goodwill too.
Yeah, and that's super important because especially nowadays, like the character of a brand, right, really defines the future of the brand. So if you're especially nowadays in 2018, where I'm not saying it's PC, but you have to have that face. You have to be facey, and you're doing the things that ultimately society is calling upon you to do, right? So whether it's autonomous driving or more inclusivity and all those things, right? I feel like nowadays you have to really pay attention to what's going on in society and then implementing that in initiatives. And like you mentioned with that workshop, right, making it more of a two-way street is crucial. And
Exactly.
I think brands can find success if they don't overdo the whole like society thing. It's because you saw the Pepsi commercial, right, where they totally fucking like overdid the whole political correctness shit, like totally shit the bed. Right, they had an in-house agency work on it. Like that's advertising 101. Like you go to an outside campaign or an outside agency, so there's not that much bias, right? You have multiple eyeballs and people working on the project, right? And it's not so, instead of like looking at it right here and you're creating it, you're kind of looking at it from this respect as the brand, which is why agencies exist, because they specialize in that.
Now, let me ask you this.
Okay.
Ask you this.
Okay.
You mentioned political correctness. Where do you see that, I guess, being a factor moving forward with how advertising is done? Because I feel like political correctness is such a ever-increasing like phenomenon with how things are done nowadays.
I feel like the quality of the story could be tremendously negatively impacted. So what I mean by that is you focus too much on the social cues and not about the story of the brand. And it's totally cool to like, what I mean by this is you're creating content to please people from a societal perspective and not, focusing on the brand. So with Pepsi, instead of focusing on the product and the benefits of the product and where you can use it, right, instead of being with friends, like this and that, they totally bastardized the protest movement, right, with the bullshit signs and all that stuff. They have Kendall fucking Jenner, let's be honest, like has no conception of like any true hardships, right? Like let's be real, like straight up, like she has no conception of these hardships that people have faced. So it's almost offensive, right, to those who are on the front lines, who are activists, right, who are trying to push things forward, and you have Pepsi come along and just totally brush a broad stroke of the whole thing, right, and kind of take advantage of the things going on in society. I just think that's where political correctness and storytelling should be separated, is where you don't have a true grasp on the issues, but you're still trying to go forward and trying to, play to this, not trend, because it's not a trend, it's what's happening right now. We're moving forward as a society, but not to bastardize it, right?
Right.
That's my whole thing on it.
I just say it because it's such a tricky subject.
It's tough. You don't want to say the wrong, and that's I'm choosing my words carefully because I don't want to misconstrue anything,
And that's the thing though is with advertising. Cause, all right, I remember like for some of us when we were getting in the major, we were kind of on the fence as to whether we wanted to do advertising or PR.
Sure.
And you know how that rivalry is back with the PR girls.
Oh my God! Don't. All right, I'm gonna watch what I say. we're talking about. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
It's all good fun, but so the difference being that in advertising, because it's a paid, it's because advertising is paid, that you have control over whatever message is being put out. With that being said, it's kind of like you have a responsibility to, I guess, like operate within how, I guess, like society is being ran.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like brands and culture is just a reflection of society, of course.
Now, however, so the only thing is, like, with things being more politically correct nowadays, some of like the copywriters and like minds behind whatever content comes out, they want to like do something edgy, something different in order to like make themselves stand out. And that can very much be like something that is like viral or trending, but to someone else or like another group of people, like that could be met with backlash. So it's kind of like, where do you find that sweet spot?
It's tough, man. You watch Saturday Night Live. You're a huge fan. You remember the Cheetos segment where they were like pitching an ad? Like, it was these two advertising agencies, and one of them like actually made a Cheetos ad, and the other one was just like with a Muslim girl like eating Cheetos or whatever. Like, that's kind of my fear, is like, not fear, is that people are going to focus so much on being politically correct and pleasing so many people, it negatively affects their message. And not negatively because it's nothing really negative that they're doing. It's obviously a positive thing that you're showcasing or highlighting these political points. But at the end of the day, it's a slippery slope to merge the two, in my opinion.
Right.
And obviously, if you want to create that message, so if you're like, I don't know, you're fucking, what's like a, I don't know, like Coca-Cola, right? Creating like, focusing on diversity and inclusivity and like all that shit, whatever. That's cool, but if you're focusing your entire brand on this like one little drop in the societal bucket, then it's not beneficial to the long-term story.
Now that you mention a brand like Coke, it's a very, very prominent brand worldwide.
100%.
So you look at like brands like that have like this massive clout, right? And a lot of times, they can, I guess, like make that mitigated risk to where it's like we can put out something like nothing intentionally, but like let's say they put out something that's like seemingly controversial.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, they're more or less too big to fail, you feel like, because
same
like
with Pepsi too, man.
Right, because granted, like, while some people will be like met with it being offensive, like at the end of the day, you're still gonna buy a Coke.
Oh yeah.
So that's not to say. Like, let's say like you're like a small brand on the come up,
right?
And you need to like make your ads like as in your face, like gritty as possible. But it's those kind of companies that have like more to lose. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like well, Coca-Cola and Pepsi are institutions; they're not companies. Like they like Pepsi. People went out the next day and bought Pepsi. Especially up here in the north, like Pepsi's huge. I don't want brands and companies and like culture as a whole to get so wrapped up in this movement of political correctness simply because the originality is not going to be there. It's going to be like if you're creating original content that's rich and it's impactful, regardless of how you message it, right? That's great. However, if you're just using a cop-out of, what's hot in today's, pop culture, like this thing, right? We're gonna bank all on this. That's where I feel like it becomes kind of phony, and you're just like banking off of, societal controversy.
Right. And it's one of those things like, from my personal experience working as with an automotive client, that things like a car, like appliances, are such high consideration products.
Oh yeah.
That for the most part, you want to be as like to the point, factual as possible. And it's one of those things where you have to like, I think it's like the ADA law, where you have to be like factual with like claims that you make in terms of like, yeah, we have like the best in towing or like best miles to the gallon. Like that has to be proven.
Yeah, because there's a lot of regulation in the car advertising space, right? Yeah.
Right. Other than that, everything else is kind of like anything goes in terms of, I guess, utilizing your First Amendment. But it's one of those things where people just there's just like a sensitivity, and it's one of those things where
I'm triggered.
I remember an internship that I had. My boss, who's like an account exec, he told me, he's like, for lack of better words, I'll just put it simply as this: our job is to make as many people happy and as few people sad as possible. You're not going to be able to please everyone, but just mitigate the risk, manage expectations as we would
manage expectations. Damn, man. Well, so. I think this is a good time to wrap things up.
Definitely.
You know what's funny? We talked about so much, and there's still more things we can talk about, but I think it's great because it's leaving room for a round 2 podcast, right? Where we can we went pretty serious into, like, I don't mean to cut you off, but we went pretty serious into, like, how we feel. We went pretty serious into, you know, what things look like for us, what the future looks like. We talked
Never
about
stop questioning things.
And, you know, this is the whole aim of the podcast, is to just shed light on certain things and to kind of just express yourself, right? So for those who have listened today, Saeed and I went to great depth about advertising, right, and the culture of advertising and where that's at today. We talked about, you know, what it's like, you know, being in that weird period between, you know, the real world and college and being in the real world, what the limbo was like. You know, we didn't get to talk about Andrew Luck, but that's okay because we already know that he's, you know, I don't know if he's gonna play next year because nobody knows.
We need a separate sports segment.
Actually, you know what? We can get together on that. We can, you know, talk
because
about pop culture.
I could filibuster all day long.
We can talk about, we can have like a pop culture podcast and sports podcast. So maybe that'll be next for us, Saeed. I think that'll be cool. But today was really more about just putting things on the table. We kind of let it ride, you know, and that's kind of what it's all about, dude. Prism podcast, having light come in and having color come out, you know, and that's kind of the end of the game here. But don't hang up yet, Saeed, because we're going to talk after this. But everybody, thank you for listening to episode 4 of the podcast. Saeed, do you have anything you want to say to the people, anything you want to plug?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. We're going to do it again real soon.
Yeah, just know that I got a quote from Dave Chappelle that at any point, should you lose, don't lose the lesson.
Yeah, I love that guy. Have you seen his new Netflix specials?
Oh, it's incredible.
The Revelations one was really good with the pimp story at the end.
Incredible.
It was really good.
And you know, for like those viewing or listening in, you know, any of you that are in doubt with where you're at in life in terms of career or, you know, things going on in your life, I forgot who the speaker was, but there is a great TED Talks about multi-potentialites. So essentially, it's kind of like we are, more or less in society, expected to like go to school and do like one thing for the rest of our lives. But the fact is, you know, a lot of us have this FOMO, you know, fear of missing out, of, you know, being denied of certain experiences. Like, you know, am I sure this is what I want to do the rest of my life? And they have a great TED Talks on. It's called Multi-Potentialites, and basically, you know, it's like whatever job, you know, you end up in. Sure, it may not be the one you want, but there's always some sort of transferable experience that could always, you know, somehow lend itself over to the next venture you get yourself into. So don't give up. Everything will work out.
Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. Never gonna run around and desert you. I agree.
Right.
I agree, man. Everyone's got to keep. I mean, we've both gone through our fair share of shit, you know. I'm certainly not where I want to be at right now, but the whole idea behind that is to just keep on trekking, keep the main thing the main thing. I'm telling myself this isn't even necessarily for like viewers, but at the end of the day, you know, it's all about being you, just doing what you want to do, not letting anything stop you, and that's kind of the name of the game. That's why this podcast exists. It's because of that. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
All right. Well, people, it was a great 4th episode. Saeed, we have so much we can talk about, to be honest.
Oh,
like we didn't even
filibuster all day long.
We didn't even scratch the surface of things we can talk about. But I think the one thing with this podcast, I'm trying to keep it manageable, you know, and I think it just leaves room for more podcasts in the future between the two of us.
This has lasted, what, an hour 47?
So we're at an hour 18 on this. And we were like, let's do an hour, but we're at an hour 18. I didn't want to get too crazy. I think it's a good.
It's about as long as the wait is like TGI Fridays. So.
Yeah. So for those who got their table at TGI Fridays, congratulations. I'll take a order of mozzarella sticks, please.
Well, I'm a potato skins guy myself.
I'll take that too. I don't care. Well, all right, people. Prism Podcast, Brian Kelly.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, dude.
Glad to be
such
here.
a pleasure. It really was a great conversation. We talked about so much good shit, really in depth, and that's what we want to do. This is Prism Podcast, baby. So, signing off, Sunday night here in New York. See you all next time.